The following 4 events are of sightings of moving objects which were observed and recorded on Dundalk Maryland Cable TV, Channel 6, NASA Select, and are associated with flight STS-48. The events were either not noticed or were ignored by the astronauts and the ground controllers, with the exception of event number 1. During event number 1, there is verbal commentary from ground control personnel which may have implied interest in this event. Although event number 1 is not as significant as events 2, 3, and 4, it still remains unexplained. Events 2, 3, and 4, however, are substantially more significant, contain numerous activities which seem unusual at best for explainable objects, and are discussed first. Clarification of event number 2 follows. The scene begins with a night view of a lightning storm and some of the stars in the constellation Orion, which are commented by the ground controller and acknowledged by the astronaut. The top of the atmosphere is observed as a thin white line in this area. Approximately a quarter to a half inch below that is observed the limb or the horizon of the Earth. Stars can be seen setting through the atmosphere at the limb of the Earth in this area. Fixed points of light on the ground appear to move upward as STS-48 moves in orbit. After the storm passes, the STS-48 passes over an area near New Zealand, and the ground control points move into the distance. At this point, the action begins. There are many objects that begin to move at various speeds and angle of direction, some of which are noted as objects with assigned numbers and referenced in this drawing. Many other objects pass by but are not shown on this drawing to avoid cluttering the drawing. No voices are exchanged between astronaut or ground controller during this activity. The magnitude and brightness of the object is noted as large circles, and the fainter the objects are noted as smaller circles. The distance traveled by each object is given as the line length. To begin with, object number 1 begins to move from right to left as observed in this area on the screen. When it reaches the extent of the line, the light appears to go out, and then object number 2, observed in this area of the screen, appears to rise over the limb of the Earth, or the horizon, move in a direction toward this point, and just at this point there's a large flash of light in this area. The object number 2 then makes a course correction and turns at 145 degrees, accelerates, and moves on out into space. By calculation of the speed where it's moving here to the speed that it's moving here, it appears to have accelerated about 3 times its original speed when it was moving in this direction. The third event is a large streak of light which moves upward towards where object number 2 was located. Object number 4, which is another large streak of light, moves in this direction, also upward. Simultaneously, while this object number 2 is making its turn, objects number 5, number 7, number 8, and number 6 also execute turns as indicated on the drawing. The objects shown here during this entire time appear to move downward as if to be in a lower orbit which moves slightly faster than STS-48. After the activity subsides somewhat, verbal communication begins between ground controller and astronaut, and the camera aboard the spacecraft begins to move away from this scene, moving downward, and picks up other objects which appear to move at various directions across the screen. One of these objects appears right in the center of the screen and has a definite shape to it, a triangular shape. The object is further enhanced and enlarged so as to get a better look at the object. Now let's take a look at the scene.
And Houston Discovery, the test is complete and results were normal.
We copy, Ken, and we concur. And just a few comm notes for you. We're going to command the PST off for you as part of the UR's closeout procedure. You might get some messages that you can ignore. Also, we're reconfiguring the telemetry formats to 103 and 161 from the ground.
Okay, we copy, and on my panel I'm showing tank 1 manifold valves closed for O2 and H2, and the react valve is talkback is open.
We copy, and we like your config.
Okay, thanks.
And Discover Houston, while you're looking at Orion, we're getting a pretty tremendous light show. We're looking at the lightning on the Earth.
Yeah, I was looking at that myself, and looks like we're coming up on sunrise.
Discovery Houston, just a heads up, we're heading off the nose, may get some radicom.
Okay, Jan, thanks.
Discovery Houston for JO.
Yeah, Jan, go ahead.
Morning, JO. We predict the maneuver to the supply water dump attitude will take about 15 minutes, and in order to start the dump on time, we'd like for you to do that maneuver now. We need it to prevent contamination.
Okay, I understand you want us to start the supply water dump now, or at least initiate the maneuver now.
We'd like for you to initiate the maneuver, and then when you get there, initiate the water dump.
Understand.
Clarification of event number 3 follows. To begin with, there's some verbal communication between the astronaut and ground control, after which all verbal communication stops and the action takes place. There is no verbal communication while this activity is in progress. To begin with, the first object that appears is an elongated object in this area of the screen, which moves in this direction until it exits the screen. The next object, number 2, appears in this section of the screen. It appears to move in this direction and wobble or rotate as it's moving in this direction. Just about at this point, the camera from STS-48 zooms in on the object, loses the object after a while because it's continuing to move off the screen. The camera then zooms out to resume picking up the image of the object. The object appears again, continuing to move in this direction. And just about at this point, there's a bright object which streaks across the screen, moving in this direction. The two objects almost intersect at this point. Several seconds pass by, and object number 4 appears to come from this area of the screen, moving downward as a streak of light. The next two objects, number 5 and 6, appear along this path, 5 being first, moving very rapidly across the screen, followed immediately by object number 6, which moves along the same path. Just about the end of the excursion of object number 6, we see a very peculiar object up in this area of the screen, which moves from this point to this point. And the object is only visible for a second or less, and immediately the camera is switched off to another area of the spacecraft, to another camera in the spacecraft, and we lose sight of this entire scene. This object up in the corner has an unusual shape and appears to have an elongated section in the middle that is darker than the two circular sections at the top and at the bottom. This object will be enlarged at the end of the scene and enhanced for easier viewing.
This is Mission Control. The troubleshooting downlink that Mark Brown is sending down 3 images for is because we seem to have had more trouble getting our electronic still camera images downlinked on the western satellite than on the eastern satellite, and the ground control officer would like more information, and this test will allow them to get some more data about why it doesn't seem to work as well on the western satellite.
Mark should just be advised, we've added on some mode pictures to disc 6 that we'd like to get down sometime tonight.
Mark, how many additional images do you need to send?
I think the disc total has somewhere about 35 on it.
Okay.
And the first 3 images requested is now coming down.
Thank you.
Event number 4 contains several objects which move upwards and across the screen, and 2 of the objects seem to oscillate, one at a very low frequency and one at a higher frequency, exhibiting 4 to 6 pulses with intervals of a pause, and then repeating the 4 to 6 pulses again. Upon closer observation, there appears to be other objects which exhibit a different shape than the 2 objects which are oscillating. The next scene that you'll see will be event number 1.
Made causes, and hopefully will help explain the role of the upper atmosphere in climate and climate variability. Of equal importance, of course, the answers that UR's mission provides will encourage more questions, and that'll hopefully lead to a little bit greater awareness of the upper atmosphere. Controllers here at the Goddard Space Flight Center, currently holding at step AP01. This process designed to check out and configure some of the UR's subsystems. This particular phase deals with the attitude control subsystem. Looking at live video right now from Discovery's payload bay showing the upper atmosphere research satellite. The UR's attitude determination and control subsystem being checked out now consists of the modular attitude control subsystem, a variety of attitude sensors and reaction control devices. The system has tremendous capabilities. It has single point failure tolerances. It will provide for the initial attitude acquisition following release from the Space Shuttle Discovery. And its attitude determination accuracy is within 60 arc seconds. Again, live video showing you a close-up view of the payload as it sits in Discovery's payload bay. In the center of your picture right now on URs, moving down is the axis. The bottom right-hand corner shows the parabolic dish for the high-gain antenna. Controllers here at Goddard watching the video with a tremendous amount of interest. It's their first really good detailed look at the payload since its insertion into orbit aboard Discovery. At the very, very bottom of the picture in the payload bay is the SSPP, and that's the Solar Stellar Pointing Platform. Slightly above that, the stacked portion that's directly under the high-gain antenna is the solar array that's neatly tucked and stored in its launch position. That solar array will be deployed later during the deploy phase and will provide the electrical power for the upper atmosphere research satellite. We're looking at the condition of a lot of the passive thermal control measures aboard the spacecraft, and you can see that they're in very, very good shape. That solar array that you see that looks like a series of horizontal lines directly below the high gain antenna. When deployed, will be about 364 inches long. The UR's satellite, as you see it right now, about 34 feet long. It's about 15 feet wide, to give you an idea of some of the scale that you're seeing. It weighs in at a hefty 15,000 pounds, or about 6.8 metric tons. Once deployed, URs will be looking for an altitude of about 324 nautical miles, and it'll stay at the present inclination of about 57 degrees to the equator. At this altitude and inclination, the remote sensors on the spacecraft will be looking about 90 degrees to the spacecraft's direction of travel, and they can see 80 degrees of latitude north or south, providing coverage of nearly the entire globe from that vantage point.
Discovery Houston for the payload bay cameras. We see that camera Delta is getting sort of warm. Couple choices. You can let us watch over your shoulder as you downlink from the ARM camera, or you can give us control of the cameras and we'll swap.
All right, Marcia, could you repeat that?
Mark, are you using one of the RMS cameras?
Yeah, we had a little trouble getting the wrist camera to come online, but it seems to be working now.
Okay, we're receiving downlink now from camera Delta, and it appears to be getting warm. We can either take downlink from your RMS camera, or you can give us control of the payload bay cameras.
Okay, we've got the control and command. Inco is free to do it as he likes.
Okay, thanks.
Controllers at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, currently standing by at step AP04 in the activation timeline. That's where the modular attitude control system sensors are turned on and initialized to ensure that they're going to be working properly. The video you're looking at right now is live video of Discovery's payload bay, showing the upper atmosphere research satellite, looking back towards the tail of Discovery. At the Goddard Space Flight Center, very, very pleased at this point with the process of the in-bay checkout phase in the UR's mission. At a mission elapsed time of 4 hours and 50 minutes, this is UR's control, Goddard.
And now, event number 5. This event number 5
was recorded during the STS-48 mission from Omaha, Nebraska. A man by the name of Harry Jordan was listening on his shortwave radio to the STS-48 mission. He heard one of the astronauts say, "What's that?" He listened intently. He then heard the astronaut say again, with more emphasis, "What is that?" He then rushed to the phone, called his friend, Claire Roberts, Mr. Claire Roberts, who then adjusted his satellite dish, tuned into the NASA frequency, and pressed video record. Thus, here is event number 5.
Columbia mission on one of the cable channels the past 2 weeks.
Every time a shuttle goes up, there are thousands of Americans who tune in to NASA Select to see outer space firsthand. Well, some of those people have seen a lot more than just space photographs and video. They claim to have spotted UFOs flying dangerously close to the shuttle Discovery on its mission last September. They even think that there's a war going on between these apparent aliens and Earth. Tonight, we have a special 21st Century News cover story, The Shadows of Star Wars.
And Discovery Houston, while you're looking at Orion, we're getting a pretty tremendous light show. We're looking at the lightning on the Earth.
There's no question that this is a lightning show from the Space Shuttle Discovery last year. But what some people do question are all the other lights that showed up on the shuttle cameras. For instance, the so-called event number 2. An independent object of light appears near the Earth's horizon. It seems to be traveling in a deliberate path, and then a flash of light seems to trigger its change of course. Don Ratch from Dundalk records the shuttle mission's camera work off of his cable channel, and he believes the object was a vehicle piloted by intelligent beings. And the shadowy spears of light that follow after that object he believes to be Earth-fired missiles.
I personally believe that the firing is from Star Wars satellites. Particle beam weaponry that you hear so much about. And why they are firing at these things, I do not know.
Don Ratch describes himself as an eschatologist. He follows and studies Bible prophecy.
The Bible says that there will be earthquakes, and it's happening. There will be fearful sights from the sky. That's Luke 21:11.
But NASA scientists and astronauts have responded to Ratch's claims by attributing the lighted objects to debris or ice from the shuttle. And the flash of light is the shuttle firing attitude correction rockets to keep the shuttle on its course. And the force of that explosion can and will blow space debris out of its path.
If there is ice or debris or nuts and bolts or pencils or whatever is floating around out there, it's going to be pushed by this gas because there's nothing else in space. If any one of these objects had turned left, I'd say, well, that doesn't fit the scenario of the trim rockets. Therefore, what is it? Tell me what else it is. Instead, it does fit the scenario of the trim rockets.
Even Vince DiPietro, an engineer for NASA's Goddard Space Center, had some questions about the streaks of light and the oddly shaped objects in each event. So he set out on a research quest to find out the answers. He wrote to his own colleagues at NASA, to the astronauts, to senators, and to the Congressional Space Committee.
The scientists, the engineers, the senators, the Space Science Subcommittee, and all of these people independently told me that it was ice and staked their reputation on this. I can't believe that they would stake their reputation and tell me something that could be something else.
This is where one of the greatest debates of all time enters the celestial picture. On one hand, you have a religious question and answer. On the other, you have a scientific one. In the so-called event number 3, a lighted object, which scientists also identify as debris, shoots through the sky. Shortly afterward, more shadowy figures follow it.
Someone has described this as something shooting at this object and then the thing shooting back. Well, I don't believe that this is an object with intelligent forces that are doing this.
But Don Ratch compares this debris to other debris that NASA sent him on tape. And regardless of the differences in each situation, he still believes that what the shuttle Discovery shot on camera was not space trash.
That's how debris behaves. It rolls and tumbles, and all the other debris you see, it's rolling and tumbling. It's not acting like that one saucer-shaped object where it just maintained and was steady.
In that same event number 3, some moments after the first lights appear, a strange figure appears in the upper left screen for only a split second before the shuttle camera switches to another field. In slow motion, the object might seem to be saucer-shaped. And while the scientific rationale is debris or shuttle ice, both religious and scientific minds question the answers. Why would the authorities want to cover up alien forces, if they do indeed exist?
Perhaps panic, worldwide panic. I mean, the stock market reacts on what's happening in the world. You can imagine if they make a declaration that UFOs are real and there's hostility out there, the stock market would probably react very negatively.
I think it would be absurd to believe that we're the only ones in the universe. And yes, I believe there is most likely many forms of intelligent life in the universe that we're not aware of as yet.
Interestingly enough, NASA has decided to censor some of the video communications received from the shuttles during future missions. Well, 21st Century News is produced by 21st Century Radio's Hieronymus & Company, which is on the American Radio Network, WNAV, WCBM, and WPTX.
Coming up, while in space as command pilot on Gemini 5, astronaut General James McDivitt saw an unidentified object approach his spacecraft and then move away when he tried to film it. One astronaut who actually chased a UFO while a fighter pilot in Germany in 1951 is Colonel Gordon Cooper. One of the original 7 Mercury astronauts, Colonel Cooper sent this letter to the United Nations November 9, 1978, to express his view on UFOs. I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets, which obviously are a little more technically advanced than we are here on Earth. I am somewhat qualified to discuss them, since I have been into the fringes of the vast areas in which they travel. Also, I did have occasion in 1951 to have 2 days of observation of many flights of them, of different sizes, flying in fighter formation, generally from east to west over Europe. They were at a higher altitude than we could reach with our jet fighters of that time.